Though we know that every cook needs to keep clean and organize the ingredients and measure things well. And the same thing here in a public-private dialogue. You need to have a disciplined way to collect and vet proposals, because it's not a big fair where the one who shots the most can have his proposal or her proposal, accepted. You need to have a templated way. So on this picture is kind of a formula that was distributed at some point to collect information, and then you can compare things. We've kind of refined that science of how public-private dialogue can actually take input from people and try to put this into a place where it can all be compared. We even at some point created a database tool that you can access from the public-private dialogue website, where a public-private dialogue secretariat can manage all those issues and create reports, because often you will have thousands of issues that you have to deal with, and people have to be able to do this in a somewhat disciplined manner. This is a formula that kind of looks complicated, and the truth is, because it is complicated. So we don't mean that you use that, but it's just a guide we're putting here so that you can get ideas, where you're very explicit at the top that anybody can submit this thing. So people can say, it's the public sector, the private sector who had the idea about this issue, and or different interest groups or the academia, whatever. So you can put different information that's relevant to your dialogue process here. And then you say, well, let's talk about the evidence base behind this thing. What is the cost of the situation we have today? And if we were to solve it in the way that we want to solve it, what's the potential benefit? So if you were in a private dialogue or in a cluster where you say, well, today we don't do joint outreach, we don't do joint marketing. If we were to do joint marketing, this is what we will do. And this is what will be the benefit. So it's kind of a business plan of doing a reform or doing an action. And so you can talk about the cost, about the targets, about the proposals, about the cost-benefit ratio. And you can decide to have, as a criteria, everything that doesn't have a good cost-benefit ratio or more than 1:2 or 1:4, we won't use it. You take the case of Ireland. I know Ireland attracted a lot of foreign investment in Ireland. Over time, in the 90s, they had this kind of criteria, 1:4. If we believe that bringing in an investment can't bring 4 times, the value of the incentives we're going to give, then there is no point in giving those incentives. So then you can look at the implementation feasibility. Can you do it in the implementation time frame that you were thinking of? Does it align with the development objectives in national plans or sector plans? You don't want this thing to be, off completely. It needs to kind of align with the rest. You kind of want to give numbers to each issues you receive so that you can count them. It's important. And then you want to say, okay, what's the issue we're talking about? What's the current situation? What's the solution which is proposed? And who should do what if we start to do this thing? And does it require a new law, a new text, a new memorandum of understanding, a new agreement? And should we start to write that down so that people can see what we mean by this reform? So this is what we mean about being very specific and using those kind of templated sheets for people to fill, or those things on the computer in a website to do. That can be quite useful, because then you can catalog everything and you can be well organized. And you've been in a restaurant with a dirty cook where nothing's organized, and often there is a correlation between how well you eat at the end, hopefully. That the clean cook, it's better. You don't get sick. So here, the more cleanly it's done and templated it's done, the better it's going to be for the people at the end, because you'll be able to say, well, we got so many proposals that came in, and this is the kind of people that submitted those proposals, and this is how much we're using, and this is so much the criteria that we used, and so on and so forth. And you can track them. This is a simple way to track it in an Excel spreadsheet. where you do a tracking system for accountability. You can say, this is the number of the proposal, this is the name of the working group that submitted it, this is the name of the issue, the primary institution that was responsible for following up. This person particularly was responsible for following up. And then where do we stand? It's been presented to the working group for consideration. It's been accepted by the working group. Now, the proposal is fully designed, because at the beginning it was an idea, but then we brought in an engineer, we brought in a consultant who is a lawyer, or we're putting someone to help kind of beef up the proposal and make it a little bit more solid. And we are ready now for bringing this thing for adoption by the group or by the parliament or by whomever is adopting this. And now it's enacted, we decided to do it, and is it going to be done? We're going to follow through. You can follow that through a simple Excel spreadsheet. Anybody can use Excel. It's very easy. We give you all the templates on the website, public-private-dialogue.org. And then you can say, is the issue open or closed? What's the benefit or not? It's very hard to calculate the cost and the benefits, but even by trying to do it, it will bring a lot of questions about and it will bring up the quality of the reform. So you can measure that like this. Those reforms, when they go through those ideas, when they go through a public-private dialogue process, it needs to be quite clear as to what's the course of action. When do you select an action for further consideration? When do you reject it? And so we advise for people to do their own little process maps, even if they're very simple, as to, well, this will be presented by an entrepreneur. Is this idea even doable? Is it constitutional or not? Whatever, yes, no. If it's yes, it goes here. If it's no, it goes there. And then if they're, does it correspond to good practice? Is there good practice information? Is there cost-benefit analysis? Yes, no. Was this, did the technical advisory working group meet and vet this? Yes or no? And eventually you get to a process where you get to very good quality reform at the end. And workable reform. You remember at the beginning of this session, I talked to you about this reform space that was closed in between three bubbles of political feasibility and administrative feasibility and desirability. And this process helps you zoom into the reform that's going to be at the middle, because every time you say, can we do it administratively? Is there political will to do it? Yes or no, and how? And you get to those reforms and you expand that reform space using those kind of tools. Here is a filtering process that was used in the Tajikistan Investment Council, where eventually you get to three actions that are presented for enactment and that are done through four filters, where at the beginning you have more than 60 actions. And so you have an attrition, of course. It makes people upset, but it also makes people understand that, we're talking about advocacy, we're talking about something where we need to bring the quality up a little bit. So the more you go, the more the filter is going to be strict. This is a form I used personally in Bosnia 12, 13 years ago, where we were capturing a relatively complex issue into 4 pages. So it doesn't take, it's not War and Peace, you don't need 1,000 pages to explain a simple issue, because what you want is you want to convince people in the private sector and the government that we need to do this thing. You need to explain it in simple words. And eventually you get to attrition. So this is kind of a, I would say, classical thing that we've observed under a number of partnerships, where, I'm sorry, the graph is in French here, but I'll try to translate it for you. On the left, you have the working groups. So in that case, 4 working groups. Let's say they present they collect each 40 proposals. So you have 116 total. And then they pre-select only about 40% of those, because some of them are obvious that they don't make sense as proposal. And then they finalize them, they work on them, and they decide to go to a plenary with all the different heads of working group and say, look, guys, this is what we have. We have about 24, we have 15% of already the whole that was collected at the beginning. And then you match that with all the feasibility criteria and all the criteria, and you further further work on the machine, and you get to about 10%, and then you look at those that correspond to the international standards and the good practice and the vetting of who needs to vet this thing, and sometime you arrive at 5%. And so it's kind of tough for a business association to go to its member and fish for 40 proposals and to have one proposal accepted at the end that's going to be enacted, that's going to happen. But it also teaches people eventually to do stronger filtering at the beginning. And what you have over time is that you might start with something like this, but those numbers are going to even out. And we're going to talk then about advocacy effectiveness, which is kind of the ratio of the issues presented to the issues achieved. Here's the Nepal Business Forum with 6 working groups. And you have some working groups that present a lot of issues, but only a few are accepted. And some that present small number of issues, but most of those are accepted. And so you get to an advocacy effectiveness, and that means that either they only collected good issue or presented issues that were of higher quality, or that also mean maybe they are better at advocacy over time. So you can see here, for instance, the ratio of implemented issues to recommended ones in each working groups is that the export promotion and trade facilitation working group is the strongest in its advocacy. And if I go back, the export had 10 issues, less than the 18 issues by the industrial promotion working group, less than the 12 by the business environment working group, less than the 14 proposed by the financial monetary insurance affairs working group. But nonetheless, most of the things that they've proposed got accepted. That means either they were better quality or they were better than others at advocating for it. This is a good way to measure what the outputs are. And you can make graphs. And when you propose a graph like this and you show it to the people in the Nepal Business Forums, well, the Women Entrepreneur and Infrastructure Working Group, they're not so happy. They're saying, what are we doing wrong? It seems that the proposals we give, they don't fit the criteria, or they are not good quality enough, and we have to do an effort. So it's also an improvement between the people in the country here. This filtering process can happen in a number of ways. Here's a filtering process that was used in Zambia to kind of try to zoom in what kind of sectors they should work on. And you had a lot of selection criteria and a short list of sectors and eventually selected industries and a very narrow scope within those industries. So those selecting criteria, are not unique to public-private dialogue. They can be used through public-private dialogue means to do many other things.